Good morning, everyone. I am Jonathan Little. Hope you're having a fantastic day. My restreaming program changed things up a bit, so hopefully we are live. If we are live, please say something in the chat box. Let us know if things are working. You want peak. Well, today we're going to be discussing how to increase your win rate at live cash games, and we're going to be discussing how to use good, strong, fundamentally sound strategies to partially do that. Hope you all have had a wonderful weekend. I played a live friendly tournament this weekend. I immediately lost. Then I played a cash game. I let my friend Andy Frankenberger play for me for a little bit while I was going to see how my wife was doing in the tournament. And he got set over setted. That was fun. He lost $1,500 of mine. I bet a ton on Jake Paul. That worked out. It's nice when all your big bets come through, huh? Lose a little at poker, lose a little bit at poker, win a bunch on YouTubers. It's all in a hard day's work. Today, we're going to be discussing how to increase your win rate at live cash games. First things first, you need to find a game you can beat. To be clear, to win at poker, you have to do only three things. You have to find a game you can beat, play it a lot, and keep a proper bankroll. Simple as that. Find a game you can beat, play it a lot, and keep a proper bankroll. Play it a lot means put your butt in the chair and grind. If you don't put your butt in the chair and grind, you're not going to make any money. Keep a proper bankroll. We've discussed that thoroughly on this YouTube channel. Check out pokercoaching.com/bankroll for that. Today, though, we want to discuss how to find a game you can beat. I look very handsome today. I think I've slept for like 50 out of the last 90 hours. I've been a little bit under the weather. Went to Vegas. You know, you go to Vegas, you get wrecked. I went to Vegas and got wrecked. Came home, I was still wrecked. But I think I'm finally getting back to it. Today, I have about 14 hours of video recording lined up for all of you. At pokercoaching.com, we are releasing a brand new, substantial course for Black Friday. That'll be coming out in about a week. And I'm the last one to turn my work in. Go figure. So I'm going to be doing all of that today. In addition to this webinar, a webinar for Peak later today, a poker coaching webinar. We got a lot going on. And then I'm going to the Knicks game tonight. How about that? The new course will be on tournament dominance, featuring content from all of your favorite poker coaching coaches. How can you find a game you can beat? Two options, really. Number one, find really bad players to play against. Or number two, work hard at getting a lot better at poker. Don't know any Korean poker players. I don't know the ethnicity of most poker players, although I'm sure you can Google it and find that yourself. How do you find a game you can beat? Well, game select. Especially in live poker, it is vitally important that you get at the party table. When you walk into the live casino, you are going to want to go there, put yourself on the waiting list for multiple games. Say you want to play 2-5 no limit hold'em primarily. Put yourself on the 1-3 game list. Put yourself on the 5-10 list. And then, in addition to the 2-5 list, whatever you get called for, probably go and take a seat. If you play 5-10, it's a little bit too high for your bankroll, but the game might be amazing. And if the game's amazing, you would rather be playing an amazing 5-10 game than a normal 2-5 game. If the game's no good, get up and leave. You don't have to sit there, right? So, get yourself on a bunch of waiting lists so that ideally you are actually sitting and playing. Remember, that's step number 2, play it a lot. You don't sit around waiting for a game for like 4 hours to get in 2-5 if you could get into a 5-10 game or a 1-3 game. And then you want to look for the party table. If you're playing in a casino that has multiple games, you're going to want to get on the table change list. Meaning, if a seat comes open at another table, you have the option to move to that seat. And to be very clear, you have the option to move to that seat. You do not have to move to that seat. You have the option to move to that seat. So, you need to be paying attention to all of the tables that you have the option to sit at. And ideally, you should be able to pretty quickly figure out which table you want to be at. And this is going to be the party table. That you want to be looking, ideally, for loose, splashy players. You want people gambling it up, having fun. You may say, but they're going to see the flop multi-way, then I have to make a good hand. Yeah, well, that's okay. It's okay to have to make a good hand to win, especially if your opponents are playing all sorts of garbage. You want to be at the loose, splashy table. Alternatively, Other tables that are pretty good may contain overly weak, tight, straightforward players. I used to go sit at Bellagio every day and play 10-20 no limit hold'em at noon with a bunch of 80-year-old men. And they were all overly weak, tight, and straightforward. And you're not going to have a huge win rate in an overly weak, tight, straightforward game, assuming your opponents play like decently well. Like none of them were horrible or anything. But they just overfolded a little bit too much on all betting grounds. And that resulted in me winning, I don't know, 5 big blinds per hour, which is, $100 an hour at 10-20 no limit, but with relatively little variance, which is fine. That said, you ideally want to be looking for the party table. Get on the table change list. Get on the list for multiple stakes if you're bankrolled for them within reason. If the higher stake is not a good game, obviously get out of that quickly. And if you'd rather be playing a 1-3 game than sitting around waiting for your 2-5 game, for example. So that's how you can game select to generally just find a better game to be in. Also, once you're at your table, get on the seat change list if that's a thing. Sometimes based on seniority, sometimes it's based on who asked for it first. Ideally, you want to be able to change seats. And you want to get position on the weakest players at the table, the worst players at the table. And get in there, get position on them, and then crush them. Now, don't be overly blatant, like, hey, you're the fish, I want position on you. Be a little more casual about it, like, hey, if you're on the end, say I like to be in the middle so I can see the cards better. If you're in the middle and you want to be on the end, say I want to be able to see all the players at the table, or I want to be able to watch this sporting event on this TV over here, and I don't want to be looking like this to watch the TV. You don't need an excuse to be fair, but if it seems logical that you do need an excuse, the excuses are usually pretty clear. You don't think you need to learn GTO to beat fish. Well, you need to learn GTO to know how to play well. If you don't know where to adjust from, you won't really know where to adjust to. And fortunately for you, solvers can go a long way to helping you figure out exactly how far you should be adjusting. For example, say on the river, you think your opponent bluffs a little bit too much. How much wider do you call? Well, the answer is a lot wider, right? If you all studied good GTO strategies, you know you should be calling a ton wider if your opponents bluff even a little bit too often on the river. The question, though, is how much wider? Because you need to make sure all of your calls beat their bluffs. And depending on their strategy, maybe they bluff too much, but with stuff like bottom pair. If they're bluffing too much with stuff like bottom pair, you can't go around calling with ace high, right? But if they're bluffing too much with stuff like jack high, well, you can go around calling with king high, right? So you always want to consider the concepts that come from GTO strategies. All right, game selection is very, 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 very important. Is Zoom 50, so $50 buy in Zoom, harder than 2-5 live? Oh, definitely. Definitely, obviously. Online poker is way tougher than live poker for all sorts of reasons. Will the party table increase your variance? Yes. You have to kill your internet? Yes. Now look, I think a lot of people at the party table think they need to be splashing around as hard as their opponents. Absolutely not. You need to be tighter and generally more conservative than your opponents. When you say a lot wider, what it is a lot? Good question. That's why you need to study GTO. In general, though, if someone's bluffing on the river, you should be too often, you should be calling with all bluff catchers that beat their bluffs. Simple as that. We discussed this thoroughly in the advanced tournament course and advanced cash game course at pokercoaching.com, and I think I made a YouTube video about it somewhat recently. We're not going to get into that today, though. You definitely want to consider how to adjust based on what your opponent's doing correctly. Or another example, say on the flop, you know your opponent continuation bets too often. How should you adjust? If you have not studied GTO, you will not know the right answer to this. I didn't know the right answer to this before I studied GTO. I'm going to give some of you who said you don't need to study GTO to beat bad players 1 minute to type in the correct answer. How should you adjust? Someone raises, and let's say you call in position. How should you adjust if your opponent continuation bets too often? And it's not a simple answer. I'm going to give you a minute, though. Mark says, if you're at a party table, you try to give off the impression that you're involved more than you really are. Yeah. Definitely look like you are in there talking, and talking sometimes makes it look like you are giving action. Hello, God of Poker. I don't know where the God of Poker is. It's not here. Check raise more. Sometimes correct. Check raise more. Sometimes correct. Check raise more. Sometimes correct. To be fair, I would have thought you should raise more too, but that's not always correct. If you've studied GTO strategies and you've done a decent amount of work on this, we've already done it for you in the Advanced Tournament and Advanced Cash Game course at pokercoaching.com. You should raise more often when you have the nut advantage. And you should call more often when they have the nut advantage. Very important. If they have the nut advantage, you simply don't get to raise all that often at all. Because you do not want to be raising into a strong range that has nuts that is never, ever, ever, ever folding. If you have the nut advantage, though, you get to raise very frequently. And, you know, like that, this is, maybe it's obvious if you're already a GTO master, but like a lot of people don't know that. I mean, no one in the chat got this correct. And I would have thought just continue more. Now, what does continue more mean? Raise more sometimes, call more sometimes. I didn't know when or why. But if you study GTO strategies, you will see this very, very, very clearly. You raise far more often when you have the nut advantage, and you call far more often when they have the nut advantage. Charlie Carroll doesn't know GTO at all. Of course he does. You kidding me? LOL. All right. After game selection, what should you do? Well, you should study. We're literally talking about this right here. I have a poker training site to make all this easy for you. All of you who said check raise wider, you only got it half right. You need to be studying at pokercoaching.com. We have an entire section of the Advanced Tournament course and the Advanced Cash Game course on how to play against someone who continuation bets the flop too often. Same thing goes on the turn in the river. Also, check out Peak GTO, our new GTO trainer. So what I want to do today is I want to go through some common spots in Peak GTO in cash games that you need to understand. We're going to talk about pre-flop play, and then we're going to look at a few spots after the flop. How much does range and nut advantage apply at live cash games at a party table? A lot. When ranges are quite wide and not defined very well, and multi-way. Well, look, multi-way, nobody really has the range or the nut advantage, and you should be doing a whole lot more checking than you may think. GTO is reasonable. When you are beat, you should fold. The problem with poker is it's hard to see your opponent's cards unless they show them to you. Will there be a Black Friday discount? Not for Peak GTO. We do have the early bird sale, though. We just launched the other day. We are consistently adding a ton of new stuff to Peak GTO. Did this just get smaller? Huh. What's happening here? Oh, whatever. Check it out, peakgto.com. We have an early bird sale. This expires today. Last chance to get the earliest pricing we are ever going, or the cheapest pricing we're ever going to give for Peak GTO. We are consistently launching lots and lots of new updates and new features. We have another big update coming out very, very soon, and I'm very excited for that. Will there be a Black Friday discount for Peak? No. This is it. This is it. What is Peak GTO? Let's take a look. Here we have our library. Today we're going to look at cash games, 100 big blinds deep. Okay? Cash games, 100 big blinds deep. First things first. In GTO world, assuming you're playing in a game with a rake, you are going to want to play tighter than most people think you should play. Most of your opponents are going to be far too loose. Here we are playing 8-handed. Here's what you should raise with 8-handed under the gun. Notice, most people raise 9-8 suited, pocket fours, queen-jack offsuit, ace-10 offsuit, ace-jack offsuit, every time. But that's a mistake. Now, you may say, but my opponents do blank incorrect. Let's say you do raise, and it folds around to the player on the button. Here's what the player on the button should do. If the player on the button will do something differently than this strategy, you should adjust your under-the-gun raising range. Now, say the player on the button always calls king-queen, ace-jack, ace-10, king-jack, queen-jack, ace-9, king-10, queen-10, jack-10, and lots of suited connectors and all the pairs, and all the suited aces. If that's the case, how should you adjust your under-the-gun raising range? If your opponent will call far too wide, which will create charts based on different preflop raise sizes. You got to realize, if people are using 6 big blind preflop raise sizes, they're not playing anywhere near GTO. And the problem making charts for strategies that are very far from GTO is that it's hard to nail down exactly what the player is going to do wrong. You want us to make charts for 6 big blind preflop raises, assuming the opponent plays perfectly post-flop? I can guarantee you that your opponent who's raised the 6 big blinds pre-flop is going to play nowhere near, anywhere close to GTO post-flop. So you'd have to make some sort of exploitative strategy for post-flop. The problem, though, is that what do people do wrong post-flop to raise the 6 big blinds pre-flop? And the answer is all sorts of different things. This is why it's very important to start with good, strong GTO strategies, then adjust the solver to account for specific things you think your opponent does wrong. But in general, when your opponent raises the 6 big blinds pre-flop, play way tighter, because they're risking a lot to win almost nothing. So how should we change this strategy if the opponent's going to call too wide on the button? And everybody's going to call too wide on the button, or all the positions. Here's under the gun strategy. If we raise, notice they don't do much calling at all. Here's low jack strategy. Here's hijack strategy. Notice none of these players should be doing a whole lot of calling. Only the button should be calling in these scenarios. So in this scenario, most people call too often, right? So how should we adjust? And the answer is we should raise wider, right? If the opponents are going to be 3-betting more, you can still probably raise roughly this range, because this range is pretty tight to begin with. Can we node lock and peak yet? Not yet. Maybe one day. That said, we do have lots and lots and lots of GTO libraries coming out from our poker coaches. Our solutions are made by good, strong, world-class poker players who've been studying on these for years. These are not made by programmers who don't understand poker. We also did not run these. Well, we initially ran these with a ton of sizes, but then went back and selected the logical sizes so that you don't have 16 different best size options after the flop, because that's not how you study poker at all, in my opinion, or any other good player's opinion. By the way, our solutions are made by these players: David Peters, Justin Saliba, Brock Wilson, and Chris Brewer. Good, strong, world-class players, some of the absolute best in the world. I'm happy to be able to bring their work to all of you. All right, so anyway, let's say you do raise. Let's say the cutoff calls. What I want to ask you is, what should you then do on the button? In GTO world, take a look at this. Under the gun raises, cutoff is going to call with this strategy. A pretty tight strategy, okay? How should you play on the button? Take a second, think about it. Well, the answer is really tight. Why really tight? A lot of people don't like this. They do not like the truth that you just don't get to splash around all that often. Depends on the rake. Of course it depends on the rake. We're presuming a normal rake in a normal game. This is a spot where you don't get to call very often at all. Now, should you actually use this strategy in live poker? These are normal default live poker rake structures. Nothing absurdly high, nothing absurdly low. Feel free to send us an email. support@pokercoaching.com will get you exactly what we used. That said, if it's plus or minus 0.5 big blinds, it's not going to make much of a difference. So, how should we adjust this strategy if the opponent raises perhaps a little bit too wide here, and perhaps if the opponent calls a little too wide here? Well, this is a spot where you get to call wider. This assumes the blinds will 3-bet with a real range. Sure, we're going to look at that in just a second. I'm talking about just the initial raiser and the caller first. Obviously, you have to consider what the players yet to act are going to do. Here we go. Did I click the wrong button? I did click the wrong button. My bad. Here we go. This is a spot where we can call wider, right? Because the initial raiser and the caller are going to be a little bit too wide. So a lot of these hands that flop very well in position become playable. Now, notice the offsuit hands are not good. Something a lot of people do wrong is they call on the button with Queen Jack offsuit, Ace 10 offsuit, King 10 offsuit, Ace 9 offsuit, 9 8 offsuit, etc., 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 etc. And that's a big mistake. Offsuit hands are bad. Now, let's say we do call. What should the small blind do? They should be very tight and aggressive. What should the big blind do? Also, very tight. Now, this is too tight, in my opinion. And you're going to find the GTO solver really does not like to be out of position multi-way at all, especially when it's very multi-way. Most people in the real world call far too wide and do not 3-bet any of these bluffs. So, all this is to say Should you do this in the real world? Or how should you adjust in the real world? And the answer is, yeah, call wider. Does the button have a calling range? The hands in, this is exactly what we're looking at here. Under the gun raises, cutoff calls, button. This is what we're doing. This is what we're discussing right here, okay? I know this may be a little bit difficult to look at in the beginning if you don't know what you're looking at, but it becomes super duper easy if you get in here and play around with peak just a little bit. Essentially, you should be calling a little bit wider than this. Should you be 3-betting more than this? Probably not. Maybe 3-bet like every ace-queen, maybe every king-queen, maybe every ace-jack. I think that could be reasonable if the cutoff's going to be too weak. I think a lot of suited connectors and pairs can call. All this sounds good and easy to me. Oh, also, did you all know we have a weekly $2,000 free roll? We're giving away $100,000 to all of you over the course of the next year. I don't know a whole lot of YouTubers giving away $100,000 to their followers. To be fair, CoinPoker's giving it away. Check it out at pokercoaching.com/freeroll. Also, you can get the best rakeback they have, the best sign-up bonus they have, and a weekly $2,000 free roll at pokercoaching.com/freeroll. Check it out. All right. What I want to discuss now is how do we play when it folds around to the cutoff. The cutoff raises with this range. Pretty reasonable. I don't think you can get too much more crazy than this. You can maybe raise suited connectors down to like 5-4 suited. You can raise 3s and 2s. You can't really get a whole lot wider than this, though. So say you raise this. And then on the button, here's what we should do. Notice we do have a decent calling range, right? Notice what is not calling. What is the best software to learn ranges? I'm going to show you the trainer in just a second. We have a lot of calling hands, basically hands that flop well, right? Suited aces, suited connected hands, some high cards, some pairs. In reality, you can probably call 9, 8, 8, 7, 7, 6, 6, 5, 5, 4, 3s, 2s. That seems fine. I would be more inclined to like call king, queen, and ace jack, and ace queen, and just 3-bet ace 10, king jack, and queen jack. I think that's reasonable. All these suited aces, suited king X seem like good bluffs. Something a lot of people do wrong, by the way, is they 3-bet way too linearly. They take hands like ace queen suited, ace jack suited, ace 10 suited, king queen suited, and 3-bet all of these. But you really don't want to 3-bet these because if you 3-bet and get 4-bet, you really don't like it. If we do 3-bet, gets back around to the cutoff. Here's what they should do. Say they do 4-bet. Notice now, you kind of have to stick around in position with all of this stuff that you 3-bet, but you really don't like it. You really don't like it at all. And you'd rather not be in these spots. So, like, these hands definitely don't want to be in that spot. So you see they don't 3-bet to begin with. And in reality, I don't think it's that bad to even be more polarized. So, like, maybe take the weakest hands here, like maybe all the king 8, all the king 7, all the king 6, all the queen 9, and then just call these. I think it's reasonable. But again, this is good, strong GTO poker. If the player in the cutoff's good, you should do this. I think that's something also a lot of people in live poker don't really understand. They just think they can get away with playing loose end splashy because all of their opponents do. They have to realize that if your opponents are making errors, yeah, you should adjust to take advantage of what they're doing wrong. But if your opponent plays well because the cutoff's good and you're good and the players in the blinds are okay, and to be fair, look, it's not that hard to play okay in the small blind. You just 4-bet the nuts, right? It's not hard. And if you call here, again, not so hard, just 3-bet the best hands in the small blind. This is a spot where you should be playing pretty close to this, and a lot of people just don't. And I changed the tournament to accommodate your sleep schedule. Send us an email, support@pokercoaching.com. Maybe they'll change it. I mean, you know that's really a simulation if we decide to change it to accommodate your sleep schedule. Peak still needs work. All programs need work. It's too early to sell. Thank you for your opinion. We made a point to try to keep the price very, very cheap for all of you. And like I said, we have lots and lots and lots of updates coming. That's why we have the early bird pricing. You get in early, lock in all the benefits for later. Please click the like button. I would appreciate it if you click the like button. Okay. Let's say the blinds fold. Oh, let's see. Raise, call, fold. Let's say, oh my God, what is happening? Let's say the flop comes queen, 5, 5. In the cutoff seat, this is a spot where a lot of people make a pretty big mistake. Notice, I want to make it be crystal clear here. The cutoff raises to 3 big blinds. The button calls. Flop comes queen 5-5, no flush draw. You have to ask yourself, should you play the GTO strategy? Which is this, betting about 45% of the time, checking the rest. What do you think? Should you play this strategy? Well, what you want to do is you want to look at how should the opponent respond. And this is, again, very useful. A very useful tool of the solver is that you could look and say, does my opponent respond correctly? Say you do bet 5.2 big blinds. Is your opponent going to do something like this? Notice, no raising. By the way, when your opponent bets big on the flop and you're in position, you do almost no raising. By the way, if they bet smaller, you would do some raising. Not a lot, but 10% is a real number. Anyway, say they bet 5.2. You think they're going to call any pair? Yes, obviously. Think they're going to call ace 3, backdoor flush draw? Yeah, probably. Ace 4, backdoor flush draw? I think people probably calling a little bit too much here with like ace 9, backdoor flush draw. I'd call ace 9, backdoor flush draw every time. Are they going to call ace jack? Yeah. Are they going to fold like king jack and ace jack offsuits? Probably to a big bet. So as you see, most people are going to play pretty well against the big bet, I would presume, right? So because of that, you cannot get away with continuation betting far more often than the GTO strategy in the spot because the opponents are going to play pretty well. What if you check? Are they going to play pretty well here? Are they going to bet with just a smattering of stuff, lots of backdoor draws, etc., etc.? Probably. So this is a spot where, in the cutoff shoes, you probably should play pretty close to GTO because, using a little bit of logic, your opponents are going to play kind of adequately. Now, if we looked at this versus big bet, say they bet 5.2, and we saw the opponent, you think the opponent's going to fold out, like let's say all these backdoor flush draws and pocket sevens because they're nits. If you think they're going to fold out all that kind of stuff, then what should you do? If you think they're going to fold too often. Thoughts on Bitcoin? Bit-coin. Is that like some fork of Bitcoin? LOL. Some fork of Bitcoin. You should be betting more often. That is exactly right. Suited and booted. Got it. You should be betting more often if your opponents are going to fold too often. So, is this a spot they're going to fold too often? I would say no. So this is a spot where a lot of people make a big mistake. They bet big. No, betting bigger is not the option. Betting bigger is not the option. You should bet more often. Bet more frequently, not bigger. You're already betting pretty big, 5.2 big blinds into 7.5. This is a spot, I can already tell you, almost everyone continuation bets this spot far too often using a small size. They'll bet 100% of the time using a 2.2 big blind size on the queen 5-5, thinking, okay, I have lots of big pairs and queens, so I'm going to bet often. And to be fair, you do. But so does your opponent. So this is a spot where a lot of people screw up by betting too frequently using a small size. And like, how would you know this if you didn't study GTO? You wouldn't, I don't think. I mean, a lot of people naturally think bet frequently in this spot. Let's change the flop. Let's say instead of queen jack jack or queen 5-5, it's queen jack jack. Notice again, lots of checks, but now we're using small bets. Why? Because essentially aces and kings and ace queen are no longer super nuts. On queen 5-5, aces and queens and ace queen are pretty much super nuts because the in position caller has almost no fives. Here, the in-position callers have a lot of jacks. So now we lack the nut advantage. So how do we know this if we do not study GTO strategies? And the answer is you don't. So would you have known, naturally, you're going to bet both these spots about 50-ish% of the time. But on queen jack jack, you bet small, and on queen 5-5, you bet big. You can be honest. If you knew that, great. But I bet a lot of people don't know this because they have not studied these scenarios thoroughly. And again, the goal is not to memorize the chart. Do not think you're supposed to memorize the chart. The goal is to learn heuristics and strategies. And we discussed this thoroughly at pokercoaching.com in the tournament and cash game masterclasses. Can you find the thumbs up button? Click the thumbs up button if you're enjoying today's show. I would appreciate it. I have a poker coaching homework webinar coming up in 30 minutes, by the way. So make sure you get into that, where we go into a pretty cool spot. I won't spoil it. So notice this is a spot where you should be betting frequently small. Now you want to ask, if I bet small, will the opponent play adequately here? Are they going to call almost everything? Any sort of backdoor draw is good enough. Notice Queen 8, backdoor draw, calls. Notice again, a little bit of raising. If notice you should not be using the big bet. If you did use the big bet, then they would basically raise never. That's, again, a very common heuristic. As your opponent bets smaller, you should be raising more often, right? Okay, against the small bet, will your opponent call pretty much anything with a backdoor draw? And I think the answer is yes. Now, your opponent in the real world may fold ace 8 of hearts, an ace 8 of clubs, an ace 7 of hearts, an ace 7 of spades. They may fold 9-8s for a gut shot. Now, if your opponent's going to go around folding those hands to a small bet, which I actually think may happen in the real world, what should you do? You're killing MTTs, small stakes. Good, glad to hear it, Quizzy. Only 3 likes? Get real. More than 3 people will click the like button. That would be embarrassing. What am I even here for if only 3 people are going to click the like button? People don't like getting better at poker, to be fair. They like complaining about bad beats. We don't do a whole lot of that here. I'll tell you the funny story from the cash game the other day. We were playing 5 to no limit. The table was full. My friend Andy Frankenberger was railing me. And I was busy watching the Jake Paul fight because I had a bunch of money on it. And my wife was playing in poker terms, so I was over there sweating her too. So I was playing for like an hour. Andy comes up and I'm like, Andy, sit and play the game for me. So Andy plays for a little bit, playing my stack, whatever. I'm running around the room being crazy. I come back. It goes, somebody raises, he calls like 30. Somebody makes it like 150. Fold, call. And he asks, should I call with the pocket twos? He looks right at me. Should I call the twos? I'm like, yeah, sure, go for it. Normally it's close. Obviously it comes 10-3-2. First guy bets. Second guy calls. Andy just puts it in. Or did he call? Maybe he slow played. Doesn't really matter. He got it all in at some point, and he was against pocket tens. Bad beat. Can you call click the like button now? He didn't even get there. Didn't even make quads. So unlucky. Will I be playing the WPT Championship this year? I don't even know when that is. I don't think they have a WPT Championship this year, do they? I know they have that thing at the Wynn, but like that's not even they have no guarantee. I'm not going to the Wynn because there's only one big tournament there, plus that free roll. I'm going to the Bahamas because there they have a 25K and a 50K and a 10K and another 10K and a 5K and a 2,500 and a bunch of online stuff. At the end of the day, if you are a professional poker player and you care about making money, you have to invest a lot of money. And the problem with the Bahamas tournament, I mean the WPT in Vegas, is you can't invest much money. You can go there. I was looking at it. You can only invest like 25K in the week. Whereas in the Bahamas, you can invest 50K in a day. And that's just a substantially better deal if you care about making money in the long run. Now, I do think the Bahamas is going to be way tougher of a tournament. But I don't care. Okay. Will people play like this? Probably. Let's say that you do bet 2.2 and they call. Let's say the turn is a 5 of spades. Do I play online? I do it. Coin Poker. Check out pokercoaching.com/freeroll to get in the free roll and good deposit bonus and good rake back and all of that. You think PC Poker Coaching should send a student to the free roll? I don't get to give seats to the free roll. I'm not the boss of WPT. Say the turn's the 5 of spades. You think you should be betting frequently or infrequently? Go ahead, type it in the chat. Let's test yourselves. Well, the answer is going to be medium. Why medium? Because we bet the flop small with a wide range, but the opponent had to call with a wide range too. Okay? When we bet the flop with a wide range and the opponent calls with a wide range, we're going to continue betting the turn pretty often. You know, medium. Never like 100% or anything, but medium. What if the turn's a king of spades? Do we bet more often or less often? Do you know? The answer is going to be more, obviously. The answer is going to be more because that connects with all of our bluffs, right? But on the 5 doesn't connect with very many of our bluffs, so we're going to be betting way less often. Again, you can use the idea of range advantage, nut advantage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. to get in there. So this is a spot we're going to be betting a medium amount. I'm going to show you, by the way, on Queen 5-5. Queen 5-5. Say we bet big on the flop and the opponent calls. If the turn's something like a 6, we're going to be doing a lot of checking. Right? Notice 60% checking now, right? Because when we bet big on the flop and they call, their range gets way stronger. If it's a king, I guess we're going to bet often, right? Because we have a lot of those. What if it's a 2? Medium, right? Coin poker is awesome. Placed 10th place in the free roll the other day. Good job. Bourbons, got your passport to the 5 million. You're excited but nervous. Don't be nervous at all. Go there and play and enjoy your trip. And try to win the tournament. Why do so many people vape at the poker table? No, I don't know very many professional poker players who vape at the poker table. I don't think vaping is good for you. I would recommend get off the vaping and most other drugs when you play poker. The last thing you want is to be distracted by stuff. As far as I can tell, at the highest stakes, at least among the players I play against, most players are not on any sort of substances. They try to be in good physical shape. They try to be well rested. They drink a lot of water. They drink a lot of juice. I drink a lot of juice. Ideally with relatively low sugar. And that's about that. What's the best way to utilize peak GTO for study purposes? Well, look what we're doing right here, right? We're going through and we're trying to study these spots. Am I playing the World Series next year? Ooh, I hope I'm alive then. If I'm alive, I'll be at the World Series next year. It's a long time from now, though. You know what we can do? Let's go over here into peak. In the trainer, we're in the trainer setting now. Let's go to full hand, cash game, 8-handed, no ante. Let's be on the button against a cutoff raise 100 big blinds deep. Hopefully this will work. Take a look at this. We can use peak to study this very common spot. People ask, like, how do you go about studying? Get in there and battle, right? Either review the hands that you play in the library, like we were just doing, or specific scenarios, like we were just doing. And then here we are. So what do we do? Queen 9 offsuit, facing the raise. What do we do? Fold, obviously, 100% fold. By the way, you get an ELO rating. I haven't really played a lot on this updated version, so my ELO is not that high yet. Only a shark, I think. But go through here and play. Do we play the ace 4 offsuit? No. Fold, 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 fold. By the way, we can go here and we can look at what we should be doing if you wanted to. Cut off raises. Here's our strategy. Try to do roughly this. Try to hit roughly these frequencies. Pocket 5s. Call or re-raise. Remember the chart? Mostly call. So we call. 10-9-4. They check. Notice here, by the way, we don't have 5 different bet sizes on the flop. That's not how the real world works. This is a spot where if we bet, we should be betting small, I think. Checking's fine, too. I think we'll go small bet. Okay, it does like checking a lot. They call. Now the turn. Presume check, check. Check 97%. River is 5. And they bet small. Interesting spot. I have no clue what the right answer is. It's not fold and it's not call, I can tell you that. I don't think it's all in either. The question is it 12 or is it 21? I'm going to presume this is 21. This is a really good hand, right? This is a spot where a lot of people in the real world think, well, what can call me if I make it 21? In GTO world, you're more so thinking, how am I maintaining balance? And so in the real world here, you really do want to be thinking, what does my opponent very likely have when they bet 3? And how much will they call? What a lot of people do wrong is they raise to like 6 over their 3. And they think, well, I want to get called, so I'm going to make it minimum. And yeah, you'll get called a lot when you make it 6, but you make way more money by raising bigger. I'm going to presume it's 21 here, because this is just a really good hand. And yeah, the opponent could have the 8-7, but it's pretty unlikely. That's going to bet the flop at least some. It's It's going to check raise the flop at least some. I don't think all in is right. GTO might like all in. I'm going to do 20, though. And that is the preferred one, although it does go all in some. Did you notice? It was a little bit quick there. But the you can click over here. Hopefully this works. Please load. Please load. Please? Please work. Thank goodness. What I want to see is how should we play this on the river. Notice fives is mixing between... Oh, wait, here we go. I want to look at this spot here. Fives is mixing. You can see it like right here. Between all in, 20, and 21, and 12. Notice it's mostly going 21, but it's using a mixed strategy here. You can click this to see like full how it's doing with the full cells. It's a little bit deceptive though, because obviously we have very, 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 very tiny portions of our range. 21 gets called by a straight only. Well, obviously not. Say we do make it 21. What's the opponent call with? Any 10 should call. And any pair should call. Now, this is where you, talking to you all here, have to use a little bit of logic and ask yourself, will my opponent actually call with any 10 and any 9? Notice a lot of the 9s are calling. A lot of 10s are calling. And all the overpairs are calling. Now, you may say, my opponent never has an overpair here. Notice, in GTO, they also basically never have an overpair. They do have some 10s, though. You may think a 10 always bets the flop. No, it doesn't. We could go all the way back there if you wanted and check a look. But no, a 10 does not always bet the flop, and a 10 does not always raise. So this is a spot where, in GTO world, any 10 finds a call. Now, you want to ask yourself, in GTO world, you can go over here and you can click right here and see which hands are raising to 21 big blinds. Is your opponent ever raising these hands to 21 big blinds? Especially the bluffs. That's what you're concerned with. You want to look at like 7-6. Are they ever raising 7-6 as a bluff? Pocket 7s as a bluff. Pocket 3s and 2s as a bluff. Ace 2 suited. Ace 3 suited. Ace 5 suited. Ace Jack. Are they ever raising these hands as a bluff? Sorry, what cards are we holding? It doesn't matter what cards we're holding, although in this hand we are discussing specifically pocket 5s. We are discussing how to play your range. Whenever you're playing poker, you are not thinking, how do I play my hand? You're thinking, how do I play my range? So, in this spot, you want to ask, will my opponent raise with these bluffs? Will they raise with these bluffs? And I would say no, they're not going to raise with these bluffs. Now, that said, they did bet 3 big blinds. When you bet 3 big blinds on the river, you will get blasted some portion of the time, right? Like you're kind of inducing bluffs. So I wouldn't put it past a lot of people who have like ace 2, ace 3, ace jack, king, queen to put in the bluff. Maybe they're over bluffing. If they're over bluffing, obviously they have to call with all sorts of stuff. So say they do raise, you do see here, this is what you should be calling with. And I think a lot of people don't. I think a lot of people fold too often. So if a lot of people fold too often, notice here, somebody in the chat, forget who it was already, said they would only call with a straight for the nuts. Well, what should we do? Go back over here. We should be bluff raising with pretty much everything because they're only calling the nuts. They're going to drastically overfold. Notice, by the way, what the 3 big blind betting range is. 25% of the time, they should be betting small, primarily with 10s, 9s, some bluffs, right? If your small betting range is almost entirely marginal made hands, notice there's just like almost no 8-7 here, right? You should be bluffing like crazy. If your opponents are going to literally bet small with lots of medium strength hands and then fold them all to a raise, you should be raising them out of their seat every single time and just stealing the entire pot pretty much for free. If the pot's free, you should be willing to take it. And this is the kind of thing you can learn by studying, right? So whoever said they're only going to call with straights, well, if you're only calling with a straight there, you are weak and tight and straightforward. And if you're against people who will blast you on the river, you're making big errors. Like I said, though, a lot of people will not raise often enough on the river. If they're not going to raise often enough on the river, you should start folding your bluff catchers. The villain will only call a big bet with a straight. Well, I disagree. I literally am showing you what the villain should do. If they bet 3, you make 21. What should they call with? Any 10, some 9s. You think the small reopen in position makes sense as people under bluff raise? You mean they bet 3, you make it what, like 7? I don't know why you'd want to make it 7. Just get full value. Whenever you make it 7, you lose a lot of value with your good hands. There is a cost to reopening the action. I realize that people will underbluff raise. But yeah, typically, when you're in position, you don't want to reopen the action unless you are getting substantial value from your good hands, which is why you need to be going big a lot of the time. All right, let's go through another hand. King 10 offsuit. Call, 3-bet. Let's 3-bet this time. Just wants us to fold. So nitty. Notice King 10 offsuit folds every time. Wants us to fold. Get real. You meant against a check on the river. If they check the river, again, in position, the smallest you ever bet is half pot in GTO world. Let's call the 7s. By the way, in the real world, I would play a little bit looser than this. Like I said, I would probably bump down these. Like I'd call King Jack and Queen Jack. Probably 3-bet King 10, Ace 9. Seems fine. I'd call all the suited connectors, call the pairs. But again, that's because I don't think the blinds are going to 3-bet adequately. Notice if I call here, the blind should be 3-betting a lot. I think a lot of people call too often, especially with these medium strength hands. If small blind folds, I think big blind calls too often and does not 3-bet these hands either. So I think people don't play well from the blinds unless you call a little bit wider than GTO. All right, they raise, we call. We looked at a similar spot, but slightly different. I think we do bet smaller this time. Looks like it's, again, mostly checking, mixing it up. Fine, we bet they call. Do we keep betting the 7s on the turn? Interesting spot. If you don't raise often enough on the river, well, so look, on the river, when you raise, you should be getting called by better hands sometimes, James. A lot of people think if they raise the river, they must win every time they get called, but that's not true. You're supposed to get called when you are beat some portion of the time. King 10 off position. In position, I literally just went through what I said. You're probably a little bit behind. All right, should we better check? I think probably check. We probably want to bet with like 8-7 and 7-6 because they have 5 outs or more outs. They have more than 5 outs. They have more outs instead of 7s. I'm going to check this one. It is check 83%. Good. River is 7. Well, they just love giving me halfway nuts on the river. Opponent bets tiny. Is this good enough to raise on the river? What do you think? Now, obviously, this is a very different set than the previous set, right? There's a 5 to the straight. Well, the 5 is the straight, and the 10-9 is there too, and they could have 10-9, but probably not. Not so many 10-9s in their range if you use some logic, right? Also, if you use some logic, look at their preflop raising range. They have almost no 5s, right? Will they check call ace-5 on the flop? I mean, maybe if it's backdoor draw. So this is a spot where we need to raise. Why? Because, well, they have almost no nuts, right? Question is how much? If they bet big, by the way, say they like potted it, then we would just call. I gotta presume. We're gonna look at that in just a second. I think now we probably want to go 12, although maybe 21's preferred. Typically, when you're raising river, as your hand is proportionally weaker and weaker, you want to go smaller and smaller. Still to like a pretty big size, but we don't want to go like all in here. I think all in would be probably not used in this spot. I'm still trying to think if this is just good enough for 21. This is probably a deceptive spot where I think a lot of people look at this and think, I can't raise to 21 because they could have the straight. But again, they just don't have very many straights, right? So I don't know. I'm going to say 12, but I would not be surprised if 21's ideal. And look, it is 21 again. And all in was never. So we were halfway right on that spot. So let's take a look what the solver does. So I had a few questions about this one. Should we bet the turn? Should we bet the turn? And I said check, and 7s does mostly check. And I said we'd probably be more inclined to bet 8-7 and 7-6. Is that accurate? Notice 8-7 bets every time. 7-6 bets, some. Actually, not very much. Okay, so it looks like we do just need to have a slightly better hand. That's good. Good to know, right? Notice the 8-7 is a little bit better. It's slightly better hand, plus it has additional outs. So we went check, check. River 7. On the river 7, they bet small. Notice what they're betting small with. They should be betting small a decent amount of the time. They do have some bluffs, etc., etc., right? Then the question becomes, does 7s raise? And the answer is obviously yes, right? The question, though, is how much. And notice the 7s is raising mostly to the big size. The 21. I'm sorry, not the all-in size, not the biggest size, but to 21. And again, this is coming purely from the idea of they don't have very many 5s, right? Going back to their pre-flop range, they have almost no 5s. So even though that straight exists, they're not going to check call 10-9 all that often on the flop, I don't think. And they don't have very many 5s. So therefore, 7s is pretty much the nuts. Notice 7-6 also puts in the raise. But notice 7-6 goes to the small size, right? So notice down here, 7-6 is going to the small size. Why? Because 7-6 is obviously weaker than pocket 7s. Okay? What's bluffing in this spot? Notice hands with a 9 are going to bluff, I gotta presume. So yeah, Queen 9 is bluffing a lot. Jack 9's a pair. Ace 9, sometimes calling the small bet. That's fun. So Queen 10, we don't have a whole lot of 9s, I guess. King 9's raising some. King 10 is raising some. Queen 10's raising some. You basically want to block 10-9 and Queen 9. Can you estimate what cash game stakes you should play based on your ELO? I haven't really considered that, but that is something we should look into. What is your EV loss of always using a 12 big blind size? I don't know. You could certainly go through and solve that in Pile Solver or whatever. So anyway, cool spot. Look, I have a poker coaching webinar coming up, so we need to pack it up today. If you have enjoyed this webinar, do me a favor, click the like and subscribe button down below. Also, today, November 18th, is the last day to get in the early bird sale for Peak GTO. If you like what you see, it's probably for you. It is a great way to study and train. Me and our pros here, these guys, some of the best players in the world, ran all these sims. We are poker players who play high-stakes poker. We are not tech people who don't play poker. We are consistently adding new stuff to Peak. We just launched it. I'm excited for all the stuff we have coming out soon. We have the drill of the day, by the way. Make sure you check out the drill of the day. Those are amazing. You can just go right over here to drill of the day. Why block the 9? You want to block 10-9. You want to block the 10-9 straight. So you want to have a 10 or a 9 in your hand to bluff raise. So the queen is not what's relevant. The 9 and the 10 are what's relevant. Notice we have lots and lots and lots of drill of the days with more coming soon. These go through all sorts of specific scenarios. And, well, I'll be discussing that later today. We have a webinar today at, what time? 4 p.m. Eastern? Does that sound right? Maybe, maybe not. 3 p.m. Eastern. We have a webinar at 3 p.m. Eastern today. Where we're going to be discussing further how to study GTO. We're going through a lot of other fun, good spots. Check out Peak GTO if you have not already at peakgto.com. Good luck in your games. Have fun. Hope you have a wonderful week and a wonderful Monday. I appreciate each and every one of you. Click the like and subscribe button before you go. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.